What's up, hockey fans and hockey fanatics out there? Welcome to episode 15 of the Hockey Lounge. It is Wednesday, July 14th, 2021, 9 p.m., and we have a special guest in the lounge tonight, senior writer from The Athletic, Rob Rossi. Rob, thanks for coming on the show tonight.
My pleasure. 15. That's the reverse of the number I wore growing up. 51. So
51 playing hockey, or?
Yeah, I played some hockey, football and hockey. Even though I grew up in Pittsburgh, it was still much more affordable to play football.
Okay.
So we all kind of learned to play hockey the wrong way, and learned to skate as best we could and that. And had I been born probably 10 years later, there would have been more ice time, and it would have been a cheaper sport to play. But I mean, hockey was my love. I just didn't start playing it at the youngest of ages. So by the time I started playing it, I wasn't very good. I'm still not very good, but at least I know now which way I should be holding the stick. So I grew up learning to be a right shot, and now I'm a left shot. So don't ask how that works. So
and Sid shoots with a basically straight blade, so he can maybe shoot either way.
Yeah, that's
pretty unique.
That blade is this. In the early days, when I say straight, like, you almost look to see if the bend was the other way.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure. So breaking news out of Pittsburgh today, Teddy Blueger getting signed for 2 years, $2.2 million. What are your thoughts on that, Rob?
I think it's a good signing for them. I think it means they're going to probably protect him in the expansion draft. I thought they had to anyway, given that, I mean, look, Crosby, Malkin, and Letang are going to be protected because of their contract situations. Jeff Carter is going to be protected, but being that Evgeny Malkin's status is so uncertain for when he will play next season, I don't think you can afford to chance losing a Teddy Blueger. And you know what you have in Teddy Blueger. Are you probably, I don't know, I mean, it's 2.2 good for a guy that's going to get you maybe in the 10 to 15 goal range over 82 games and get you he's going to be one of your top penalty killers and going to be a good defensive centerman on one of your bottom six forward groups.
Yeah,
I think that's good. I think they might actually have a better deal maybe next year. They might get better value. But what you would pay to replace him, especially when you don't have the center depth you did because of Malkin's situation, if you're a team that, as they do, want to contend for a playoff spot and consider themselves, when healthy, a Stanley Cup contender, whether we agree with that or not, I think you have to keep a player like this. And I mean, if you think about it, what they're paying Jeff Carter against the cap because of the retention on LA, and what they're paying Blueger, these guys are basically going to be their second and third centers until Malkin comes back. And what are they? They're getting both of those guys for less than $4 million. So I think that's a shrewd move by this management team.
Yeah, I like the move. I think 2 years, you see what he gives you 2 years. And, he blossomed into one of the better penalty killers in the league last year with 10. If they were unbelievable. My question is, though, looking at Blueger, again, what I'm finding, Rob, is that a lot of players that come to Pittsburgh, the bottom six especially, they tend to forget the player that got them there. Mm-hmm. So, because Pittsburgh likes to play that run and gun, open style, freewheeling, a lot of goals, a lot of entertainment type of hockey. If you look at Blueger's stats from last year, 7 goals, 15 assists, 22 points, plus 10. If you're going to insert him once you get a healthy Malkin back, he probably drops down to the fourth center, let's say. His average for faceoffs right now is 48.7%. If you look at a team like Montreal that just went to the Stanley Cup Finals with a guy like Deneau, able to win every key faceoff, right? What are your thoughts on that? Because, again, those are the things on a fourth-line center. You got to have a guy like that. That's just the way I look at a team. But what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think to be fair, he really became a regular 2 years ago. Kind of started establishing himself firmly as what niche he filled for them this season. I guess the season before too, but sort of cemented himself in that. So talking about a guy that over 2 shortened seasons A lot of progress. And I tend to think face-offs a lot of times is how much repetition do you get in game in those situations?
Okay.
The truth is, unless it's on the penalty kill, he doesn't take a lot of the big face-offs because Crosby on the ice for that.
Yeah.
Now, I think this year they'll need to use a Bluger, but they'll also have Jeff Carter, a right face-off man, which they desperately need that right side draw. I think to take some of the responsibility off Sidney, who's going to have to exert more offensively than maybe the two-way game we've seen from him, given the limitations of Malkin. And I also think Bluger has so I think you'll see Bluger in situations where we'll find out if he has that capability to be a better draw man. I think he can be a 51% guy, and I think that's a fair expectation for him.
For sure, I do. Yeah.
He'll take a lot of those draws in the defensive zone on penalty kills when it's a lot harder, right? And also, I think, at least the way I saw it, the Penguins' penalty kill was not great this year. I put a lot of that on Mike Vellucci. I don't think he did a great job of either designing or getting through to the penalty killers. Their wingers didn't help them a lot in those face-off situations. I mean, I don't have to tell you, right? We blame centers for face-offs, and it's not always the case.
For sure. Yeah, the wingers got to get engaged on that. Yeah.
Right. But I think, to get to your initial question, we have a saying here in Pittsburgh, well, he's a Penguin now. And we say that about any player that comes here who comes from sort of a more responsible background and then becomes like infatuated with scoring.
Yes.
I think what we've seen from Bluger in terms of his offensive instincts, I'd like to see him pursue that more. Not get away from the defensive game that he plays, but I think there's more to him offensively. He has a really good shot.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see him grow and take comfort in that. And I also think they're going to need that this year because when you look at this Pittsburgh lineup without Evgeny Malkin, you start going, okay, where are they getting the goals from? Because you got to figure they're going to lose somebody pretty decent that had contributed to Seattle.
Right.
Even if they lose a Brandon Tanev, that's, double-digit goals there, right? So they're going to need somebody like Jared McCann did last year to find that level of consistency offensively as opposed to being just a spurts guy. Yeah. And I think Bluger can do that. And I think sort of embracing his becoming a Penguin would be good for him and them to a point.
Yes, and I agree, for sure. So myself being a huge Penguins fan, Rob, when we talked about this offline here before we got on, the last 3 years, the playoffs, besides the bubble, the early exits, the first round exits, the frustration probably for the players and the organization, but as a Penguin fan as well. You're looking at, 4 straight to the Islanders in 2019. You're looking at the bubble hockey, which, again, guys were off because of COVID, out of shape probably. They only had, training camp for a little bit. They played one game, I believe, prior to stepping into a playoff game. No fans, all that fun stuff. And then this year here, 4-2 against the Islanders. I was really shocked that the new regime with Hextall and Burke did not make a coaching move. And my question to you, Rob, is this. Mike Sullivan is a great hockey coach. He brought 2 cups back to back. He changed the style of play in the NHL. Speed, tenacity, on the puck, hungry always on the puck. Those 2016, 2017 teams. He changed the way the NHL went. Then all of a sudden it sort of went back to the heavier set with the Caps and the Blues. Is this a system issue, Rob, or is this a roster issue?
It's a great question. I don't know that we know the answer based off this postseason.
Okay.
Because I've covered the entirety of the Crosby era. I've never covered a series where a team trusted its goaltender less than the Penguins did in Tristan Jarry by the end of that series. And I covered the series between the Penguins and the Flyers when the goalies on each side, Marc-Andre Fleury and oh my goodness, I'm forgetting who it was for the Flyers at that time. I'm so sorry.
It was a run and gun series. I remember that.
Neither goalie made saves.
Yes.
And neither team played much defense.
Yes.
It was a very power play driven series, right? So I have a hard time assessing this season because while I do think the Penguins are somewhat exaggerating, we were clearly the better team, because they're basing that off shot totals. I do think they were the better team in terms of chances throughout the series, and I think their goaltending let them down. They were better in games. The games that they lost that turned the series, I think, were 1-5, and in both of those games, Tristan Jarry was below NHL standard.
Right.
I'm not going to tell you the Penguins end up in the Stanley Cup final if they get just average goaltending, but I think they beat the Islanders. I thought going into the playoffs, the Islanders, not the Bruins, were the toughest in-division opponent for them, because I thought the Penguins' depth would win out over the Bruins. So I do think if the Penguins had gotten just average goaltending against the Islanders, and if they had gotten maybe slightly above average goaltending against the Bruins, they would have had a real shot to be in the Final Four. And then what do you do? So I don't think Mike Sullivan's system was a problem, because they actually generated more chances against the Islanders in that Barry Trotz attacking system than they had at any point since early against the Capitals, the first time they beat them when Trotz was with Washington in 2016.
But do you find with the system, though, that because they want their D to be activated a lot, that there's always odd man rushes? Like, I'm finding, like, again, you look at that Islanders series, you look even back in 2018 when they lost, they got the throne from being Stanley Cup champions. It was an odd man rush. Do you find that, do you think the D just have to sit back a little bit more here with this team?
Yeah, I think the one criticism I have is their defensemen are too pinch happy. And they aren't content to sort of just relax to the point where they're not completely conceding. But I also think a lot of that is something they did better this postseason than they had certainly in the previous, against Montreal and against the Islanders in 18.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't getting pucks deep in those series. They got pucks deep.
Mm-hmm.
I think their problem is when they won those Stanley Cup titles in 16 and 17. I mean, the 16 team to me is one of the best teams of the Cap era, because they played 7 games against the Lightning, and because it was basically a 7-game series disguised in 6 against Washington that year, that overshadowed the fact that they were utterly dominant in almost every game that they won.
Right.
And it took incredible goaltending efforts to even stay on the ice with them that year.
Yes.
They could get the puck deep, and they had the speed to go get it and the skill to do something with it. In 17, they still had elements of that. They also had this collective will that, like you saw with Tampa Bay this year, sometimes a champion will develop that, and they have a fortitude that the other team can't match. And in 18, I really think that was a coin flip series, but I think the other 2 series against Washington were coin flips. And basically what happened is one team won 2 of those series and one team won the other. And those are the 2 best teams in hockey those 3 years.
Right.
It probably went the way it should have.
Yes.
So I think after that, so we're talking 18 on.
Yeah.
I think 18 and 19, I apologize for that.
No problem.
In 18, they didn't play the system honestly. So their defensemen were pitching. Their forwards weren't getting the puck deep. They weren't fighting for the puck when they got it deep, and they weren't as capable of going to get it.
Yeah.
And in 19, I think Jim Rutherford erred grievously by addressing needs that weren't there up front instead of a need on the back. They had no third pairing against the Canadiens.
Yes.
It was worthy. And also, and look, this is a factor, and I'm not trying to sound long-winded or too accusatory to I don't ever think it's just one thing, but I will tell you this.
Yeah.
Matt Murray in 2020 and Tristan Jarry in 2021 did not force either Carey Price or Varlamov to be superior, okay, or whoever was in the net for the Islanders, because obviously,
right.
They did not force the goaltending opponent to steal the series because they did not make saves in critical moments when the Penguins needed it. And I've always said, I don't buy into this goalie steal series because I did not tell me once. Goalies steal moments. And then what often happens is the combination of that moment not going in favor of the team that created that chance and the other team backing up their goalie at some other point in the game ends up flipping a game that can turn a series. But it's not that the goalie doesn't stand on his head the entire series.
No, exactly. It doesn't happen.
But you do need your goalie to make saves, and you really need your goalie to make regular, routine, what they label the sort of the low to mid danger saves. They didn't get any of those from Murray or Jarry. And I will say this, if you look at the Penguins' regular seasons each year in the past two, their shot suppression was top 10 in the league. Their defensive metrics were top 10 in the league.
Right.
Their goaltending numbers were bottom 10 in the league.
But when it comes to this, Rob, like in terms,
how are you supposed to? How would any coach at any level get past high-level competition if the goaltending is bottom 10 in the regular season and doesn't elevate when the postseason begins? I'm not trying to say it's only goaltending, but I don't know how you overcome that with adjustments.
Yeah, it's very tough. If your goalie's not making the saves, you're in shit's creek, to be honest with you. But that being said, in terms of when they get back to Sullivan, right? Last year in the bubble, he was really hard with going with Matt Murray, and then he decided to go with Jarry, okay, at the end there. With the Islanders this year, okay, I know that the Smith was out, okay. You had Legacy backing up, Jarry, but
you or I.
What's that?
That might as well have been you or I.
Yeah, exactly, right? So he was
Game 5, and I said, if you would have told me Casey DeSmith's groin, or sports hernia, whatever you want to call it, would be the determining factor in this series, I would have laughed at you. But it kind of was.
It was, because if you look at the overall season of the 56 games, Rob, is that if Jarry had a bad outing, DeSmith was in the next night, or vice versa. So they fed off each other. Once we got it against the Islanders, they couldn't do that. And I know Sully's hands were tied, but it just seems that stubbornness of Sullivan, his system, he wants to play his system. He doesn't really change a little bit. Yes, you said they got pucks in deep in this series. I'm just wondering, again, with the new regime, have they had a conversation? Okay, Berkey, again, being in Toronto, we've had Berkey here, tenacity, all that stuff that he preaches. He wants a heavier set team, right? Is Sullivan going to buy into this
Well, here's the thing. Berkey, Brian talks about wanting a heavier set team, but that suggests there's heavier set players to go get. And those players, yes, has the league gotten heavier than when the Penguins won the championships in 16 and 17? Yes. Do those players, are they plentiful? No. I think when you judge a coach, the primary thing is, are the players listening, right? That's the first question you got to ask. I can tell you, yes, that's the case. He's not lost this room.
Okay.
Anybody that looks at that, and anybody from the outside, not you, but anybody, I tell them, they're not tuning him out. Now, so then it becomes, well, is he open to change? I would suggest he had his entire coaching staff change on him except for his goalie coach. Maybe that's the change they should have made. But, he had 2 new assistants. Say what you will. I think Todd Reardon did a masterful job. I don't think.
I think Letang played one of his best seasons under Reardon again.
It's not an accident that Chris Letang's 2 best regular seasons in recent years have been Todd Reirden's last and most recent with the Penguins.
Right.
I think when you look at they won their division, and I think all of us thought going into the season it was the best division in hockey. I still think it was the best division in hockey, not because the top teams were the best, but because the competitiveness of the group. Yes, they had Buffalo and New Jersey, but they also had I think Philadelphia's record was made worse by the fact that they had to play the Rangers, the Penguins, and those other teams as often as they did. So, they won their division, and I will say this, and this kind of goes back to your previous question. Should Mike Sullivan be on the hot seat? I don't know. Should he have a free pass? Definitely not, because it's unacceptable to not win a playoff series for as many years as they have. Yeah. That said, the team they lost to in 19 showed signs during that series and in the next one of being a team that when it came time to play in the playoffs had some sort of, metamorphosis into something better than what we'd seen. And that team is in the Stanley Cup final this year. The team they played this year and the team that swept them in 18 was in the Final Four this year, in the conference final the last 2 years, and probably played Tampa tougher than anybody. So there could be an element, if you're this management, of going, maybe we have more here than we thought. And I think to introduce a coaching change, if we take what it would cost to pay Sullivan to go away and all that, I think that would be a great, you have to know who you want and be able to go get it. And I don't when I look at this, I go, who is out there right now?
So can I throw out one name?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Throw out one name. And he's still available, but Rick Tocchet.
Right. Well, here's my belief. I believe that if Mike Sullivan wanted to explore options this summer, he would have been great. He would have been allowed to. If he wanted to throw his name into the hat for the Rangers or the Seattle Kraken or whatever. I'm just throwing things out there.
Sure, yeah.
Had he wanted that, the Penguins would have said, Mike, we're not dissatisfied with you, but if that's what you want, go ahead. If you're not completely down with our vision, go ahead. And I think in that scenario, Rick Tocchet would have been the next coach.
So Rick Tocchet's still available, Rob.
Right.
And he was just in negotiations with the Leafs in terms of becoming their assistant coach. They went another direction, I guess, due to salary. Is there a chance maybe that Tocchet comes back to Pittsburgh as an assistant?
I wouldn't rule out Tocchet coming back to Pittsburgh in some capacity. And I'll say this, Sullivan has said Tocchet's the best assistant he's ever had. And I will say this, if you had a assistant staff of Reirden and Tocchet with Sullivan, I would then argue that's the best coaching staff in the league because they have a mix of everything. I tend to think, I live in a market where, the football team has had a standard of success that is superlative to almost any team in any sport. I think they've had 8 bad seasons in 50 years. And, the Pittsburgh Steelers in the NFL have won the most games, the most divisions, the most playoff games, and tied for the most Super Bowls since the AFL-NFL merger, right?
Yeah.
They had 3 coaches, okay? So in Pittsburgh, we're conditioned to think, show patience. And in Pittsburgh, we also are conditioned to think, it's probably better to fire the coach in season because when the Penguins do that,
Stanley Cups
work out. But I actually think Mike Sullivan, the past 2 seasons, should have been a Coach of the Year finalist. I think he should have won the game.
He should have won this year.
Yes. Yeah. People don't, I hear all the time, he has all these star players, and I'm like, they're never healthy.
Yeah, they're injured, exactly.
Ever.
Yeah.
That said, they need to get to the playoffs and win a round next year, I think, for Sullivan to come back. I also think, though, when you look at what the Penguins are doing with this management, I think, again, and the Malkin injury looms large over everything, and I'm still of the belief that Malkin, before this injury,
he was the best player in the last 2 games of that series.
Right. And he was doing it on one leg, right? Yeah. And so I'm still of the belief that Malkin and Letang have good hockey left, and the Penguins will find a way to extend their contracts to run concurrent with Crosby's, right? And people say, oh, that's sentiment. Well, that's a little bit of sentiment, but that's also, what you're going to pay those guys for what their replacements would be. You're probably going to get better deals from those guys than going out and trying to get like a second center or a 1D on the open market or trading assets that you don't have. So if we take all that into account, I think all the pieces around them, everybody, and that includes Sullivan, is on a watch this year because they have to get to the playoffs and they have to advance in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. If they don't, there have to be changes.
Right. So before we get
going like this,
there's too much talent to be knocked out, early exits like they have been. So before we get into the goaltending, my last question is about Jake Guentzel. And I love Jake. Like, kid's got fabulous hockey IQ. He's been the first winger, I think, since, you look at Pascal Dupuis and Kunitz to play with Sid and have that chemistry.
Right.
And, he put up those, I believe, 23 playoff goals in his first couple of playoff runs. Fantastic. But he's just looked like, I'm not going to count the bubble because he came off that shoulder injury. Forget that. But this playoff season, he did look like a rag doll out there. He was, and I saw him in his press conference, and, Jakey's got to go to the gym, I think, because, he was just getting manhandled in the corners in front of the net. What do you think? What are your thoughts on Jake? Because there are rumors with him, right?
Yeah, there are. I don't think they'd be against trading him, but they're not looking to get rid of him. They're looking, if they're going to trade Jake. I look at it this way. When they made the trade for James Neal, they gave up the best player in terms of skill in that trade. But they got back Patrick Hornqvist, and there was another player involved in that, and I forget who it was. But basically, they're like, Hornqvist isn't the scorer Neal was.
Nick Spalding was
Nick Spalding, right? Yeah. Not a good. That actually added cap space. It was one of those like the Jim Rutherford era. I mean, we could probably do 7 hours.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's sort of this mixed bag of like hallucinatory drugs, but also ecstasy. Like it was really low and really high, and you're not really sure what the mix was, but the good times were really good and the bad times were really bad, and you're kind of like, what the hell happened? It was like, I remember when I went to my first Grateful Dead show, and I was in high school, and like I breathed in everything that was around me, and I came home with a headache, right? And sort of the way I felt after the Rutherford era. But I think if they're going to trade again, so it would be a similar type thing to get that player who plays. And look, Hornqvist is a guy, I don't think anybody thinks of him as big, but he's heavy, right? He plays with an edge. And I think that's the type of – I don't think were Hextall and Burke here, they would have ever traded Patrick Hornqvist. He's their type of guy, right?
100%, yeah, for sure.
So I could see a situation with that. I will say this about Jake. I don't think my experience is when a player of that pedigree, and by that I mean he is a very smart hockey player. He is a very skilled hockey player. But he's not a big hockey player, right? When a player has a shoulder injury like that in season, the toughest part for him is that next season, because very often you don't get to train the way you want to until the off season after the comeback season.
Right.
I do think there was an element of the Jake we saw against New York, Brooklyn, Long Island, whatever they are. The Jake was being ragdolled, and that's a perfect way to describe it. I don't know that we will see that Jake next season, because I think he's going to get a full season of conditioning and strength training. And as anybody that's had an injury will tell you, or in a routine, the toughest thing this year for a lot of players was their routine was completely off. Mm-hmm. I think the best thing for Jake Guentzel would have been not to play in 19 or the postseason, to just take that off and do nothing but focus on coming back this past season. Right. But I'm not going to fault him for trying to come back and play. And I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt because he was so great early. That said, I don't have to tell you, there are examples of players that come into this league and are at their best in their first 3 and 4 seasons. And the trick in this league is you have to always end up paying for those guys. And the trick is to move them before they become a liability. Now, I'm not saying Jake's definitely that guy.
Yeah.
I think the Penguins are starting to – I think this management is going, be that guy. And I think that's what they're grappling with right now. And I also think a lot of his future in Pittsburgh depends on where things go with Brian Rust this summer.
Okay, perfect. Goalies, Jari. Now, this was the talk of the town in Pittsburgh.
Not a lot of good talk either.
Not a lot of good talk. And like we said, Legacy was the backup for the playoffs. Jari, put up a pizza in the middle there in overtime.
Do you know
Fleury,
what he's trying to do in that goal?
Sorry?
No.
I thought he was trying to break out going up the middle. I'm not sure. I think he panicked. It looked like he panicked at one point.
I have a theory on it, and nobody's told me this, but here's my theory. And I should preface it by saying my biggest critique in terms of critical assessment of Jari is he does poorly at situational reads. I've seen him over the past try to make plays in close games that you just shouldn't make as a goalie. Mm-hmm. He has a lot of confidence in his ability to play the puck. He can play the puck really well. I talked to several goalies about what I asked them after that, what would the goalie be seeing? What would you be seeing? Everybody was like, well, okay, Dumoulin's on the left wall. That's a good read. Malkin's right there. He should have put the puck to him. He obviously thought he saw something and went for it. And, the consensus seemed to be he thought he saw something and didn't, and then realized he didn't, and then panicked, and then just completely misplayed the poke check. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think the situation is like, did he have 3 big mistakes on that play or just 2?
2,
right?
Yeah.
But I have a theory, which is I've seen him try to do something similar when they were in overtime at 3-on-3. And I wonder if he just forgot that it wasn't 3-on-3. I wonder if he thought, I'm going to fire that puck up because I have a defenseman here and I have Malkin here. And the way they play at 3-on-3, they will swing that other forward off to get the fresher forward on. Yeah. They'll usually let their defensemen stay on. And because their defensemen tend to play with offensive intentions, they've never. And so I really wonder as I look back, and I haven't had a chance to talk to Tristan about this, but you wonder if he just forgot that it was 5-on-5. And in a way, I kind of hope that's the case because it would make more sense than anything else.
Yeah, I'd take that.
Look, they want a veteran. They're looking for a veteran. That doesn't mean they've given up on Jari, but I will tell you that if they can find a way to get a veteran and not have Jari be part of this, they will do that.
No. Will that veteran be Marc-Andre Fleury?
As I like to tell people, everybody accurately says, well, you're in the bag for Evgeny Malkin. I'm like, I'm writing his book. But guy I actually have been closest with in my tenure covering the Penguins all these years was Mark. And, I would love that. I actually think you can make an argument that he's the type of goalie that they need in terms of the way he plays would fit the way they play. And look, I'm not second guessing here. Anybody that follows me knows I actually was saying they should have kept Fleury over Murray because my argument then was one goalie knows how to play in front of a team that gives up chances, the other doesn't.
Yes.
And hey, whatever. I don't think anybody would have. I think anybody not named me would have made the decision they made. But I don't see how they make a Fleury deal work unless it's a 3-team deal that somebody eats some salary. Yeah. But I will tell you that Mark wants to be in Vegas. He wants to be, his family is very happy there. Mark also hopes that if he isn't going to finish his career with Vegas, that he would finish his career in Pittsburgh. he would be willing to come to Pittsburgh and, if allowed to compete for a job, eventually grow into the guy that sort of becomes the caretaker, right? I think the situation here is, does Mark trust Vegas's management and coaching staff? I wouldn't if I were him.
I wouldn't at all.
Right. And I don't know what I do not know what the Burke Hextall administration thinks of Fleury. I would assume they would go, hey, he's a Vezina winner, and we know we can handle this. But I will say this, even if they would say do that, I think you would still need a goalie that can play 30 games, because I don't think you want Mark at his age playing more than 50, 55, because you're getting that goalie to play in the playoffs, right?
Right.
So,
but
go ahead.
You have $4.7 million tied up in goaltending right now with Jarry and Casey DeSmith, right? Both of them are on contract for this season. One has to go here.
Yeah.
Correct? Well,
I mean, yes, if you're bringing somebody else
in. But why?
I think it would make more sense to keep DeSmith, because that's a more palatable number. And look, I question whether Tristan Jarry can come back and gain the confidence of this room, because there's not a damn thing. I mean, he could go 82-0. Yeah. When he gives up that goal in the playoffs, it's like, well, okay. I mean, well, I don't know, 82-0 might, but my point is, it's like, there's not a lot Tristan Jarry can do between now and the start of next postseason, if the Penguins are in it, to prove that what ails him is, fixed. Now, here's the thing. That was his first playoff series. And he wouldn't be the first goalie to have a bad first playoff series and then go on to have a respectable career. But the question becomes, do the Penguins want a chance for a third consecutive season having what they feel like is a cup contender be handed over to goaltending that is bottom 10 in the league? And this is why I stress this. The Murray-Jarry combo was bottom 10 in the league. The Jarry-DeSmith combo was bottom 10 in the league. Something is broken with the goaltending in Pittsburgh. And where we used to say, well, they don't play great defense, they give up a lot of shots. Okay, that's not necessarily true. Yes, they give up odd man rushes to a team like the Islanders in the playoffs. But the truth is, the Islanders didn't get those odd man rushes in the regular season. Teams weren't, early on they were, but after the first 10 games, the Penguins stopped giving up those chances. So, I mean, I think you have to evaluate everything about the goaltending situation in Pittsburgh, from the goalie coach to the style the goaltenders play. And, I will say this. Did you look at the size of the goalies in the Final Four? I mean, they're big.
Vasilevsky looks like Gar Snow doubled.
Right. That picture of him and Kevin Price, was like, well, I should hope the guy that looks like Godzilla won. I mean, exactly. I really question, like, do they need to go get a guy that has a presence in net? And that doesn't just have to be physical, but Tristan Jarry doesn't have a presence in net. Matt Murray did not have a presence in net. You look at the goalies that have won, they have a presence, right? And the Penguins have an identity as a team. They don't with their goaltending. And I think they need to go. When they had Marc-Andre Fleury, they had an identity. What, good or bad, they had an identity with their goalies. Matt Murray in those two seasons, those two magical postseasons, was what he had been in the playoffs, which was like the Terminator, just, dun, 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 dun. And then he became the antithesis of that. He went from being the guy that was so mechanical and so rock solid, and like the puck just hit him. He was the best tracker of pucks I'd ever covered for those two postseasons. And then he just wasn't. They get beat glove side. Any one of their goalies get glove side all the time, right?
Yeah. Glove side, short side.
Right. You know how many times I've sat next to somebody in the press box over the past 3 years that either played in this league as a forward or as a goalie, whether they be a scout from another team or a former Penguin or a former whoever that's in town, and they've gone, why are their goalies so deep in the crease, so off their angle? Everyone says, oh, Murray had a bad glove. Jari doesn't have a great glove. Nobody has a great glove when they're off their angle and that deep in the crease. For the life of me, I can't figure out why their goalies don't do what every other goalie does, which is try to cut off the angle and play big in net. But they've stopped doing that. So I ask, I mean, they're either not listening to the coach, something's not getting through. I don't think the coach is telling them not to do it, but something's not connecting there.
Yeah, because you're seeing the same type of goals being scored, right?
Well, and that to me is the concern. Like there's a goaltending problem here in Pittsburgh. And Hextall, I think, is going to try to fix that. I think he's going to go out and look, it should be a favorable market for teams given the goaltenders that will be available either through trade or free agency and whatnot, right? I think last year, one of Rutherford's biggest mistakes was misreading the market completely. He tried to get everything done so quickly, and then it was like a buyer's market everywhere, and he had already bought, right?
Yeah.
Which isn't to say he made all bad moves, but he gave away too much even for the good moves. But he didn't need to give Tristan Jarry 3.5 for 3 years.
No.
And it was like, I know one of the problems ownership had with Jim at the end was you're just giving contracts to people.
Like candy. Yeah.
Marcus Pettersson, who I really like as a hockey player and a person, and I think Pettersson has more upside than a lot of my colleagues here in Pittsburgh. John Marino, who I was a little bit like, let's pump the brakes. You know, I was calling him hockey god in jest because everybody wanted to turn him into like
the next Crystal Tang.
Right. And I mean, I think Marino can be a really good player in this league, but you know, he's the top 4 guy in this league.
Right.
Potentially. I don't think he's like necessarily God's gift to top pairing. Okay, so he gave those guys contracts that Rutherford did that paid them too much early when they're a cap constraint team. Right. And he's talking about, well, we're going to get savings on the end. And I'm like, who in the hell cares about 4 and 5 years from now? You got Crosby, Malkin, Letang in this group now. Like, you want to, you know, sign them to play hardball. And the same was with Jarry. Now, that said, they did try to get Marc-Andre Fleury back last summer.
Yeah, I read that. Yeah.
And they really felt they were close. And from what I heard, the deal was going to happen, except that Vegas's owner stepped in and said,
kiboshed it, yeah.
Kiboshed it.
So question though, Rob, like, so you bring up the contracts, you bring up, you know, stuff like that, but then you bring up Christopher Letang, Sidney Crosby, Jenny Malkin. The window's closing. Like, we got to be honest here, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's been closing for 5 years now.
Right, but there's still a lot of hockey left in the tank. I believe in all 3 of them.
Not closed.
It's not closed.
Yeah, it's like this, right? Like this is the window.
Yeah,
right? Like it used to be here, but like, look, there's still a lot of room. It's like go above your like this. That's like this right here is like 2/3. So we're a little bit past 2/3, but there's still a good third chunk left there.
But with the window, you need a goalie.
Right, yeah.
You need a goalie here because then you're wasting Sid, you're wasting Gino, and you're wasting Letang.
Aha, yes. You found out the secret, my friend.
So they have to do something now because you cannot, like you said, go into next year. I believe that, listen, if they get rid of the Smith, maybe they bring in a veteran goalie and, you know, they split time, Jarry and this veteran goalie, whoever it is, or they get rid of Jarry. And we're going to get into that quickly here in regards to the expansion draft. But they need a number 1 guy for the playoffs.
Right.
Because you cannot waste 87. He's like, you know, he cannot finish his career with only 3 Stanley Cups. He's too good of a hockey player. I
mean, he can.
He can, but the teams have been good enough to
out on a bad team. Like like I agree with you. Like three's good.
Three's great. Three's great.
Great number.
Mario only has 2, so and he's my guy, right? So
I think Crosby, Malkin, and Letang are still good enough, and I think the Penguins as an organization still do enough things right to challenge. I think things have to go in their favor more than they did, but you're right. They need a goalie. So I think here's the question, right? Let me ask myself this and answer it. Are they better suited to do what I think they're doing right now, which is seeing where the market goes, having a list of guys that they might think are fits, and going almost like a draft scenario where, like, if you're picking third in a top 3 prospect draft, you're going to get one of the guys you want. If there's a guy you really prize above in that 3, maybe you try to go up and make sure you get that guy. But if not, and you're comfortable with any of your choices, right?
Yep.
Then you can let the thing come to you and do it on your terms. I think Hextall, based off his track record, is more likely to go, I have this list of guys. I want to see where the market's going. I don't want to jump in because I'm going to get somebody, right? So I think the thing he doesn't want to do is go, I have limited assets right now. I can't afford to give up assets that I don't really have in reserve to go get the guy I think might be 5% better than the other guy. Because if you're the Penguins and you're thinking, if there's, say, 4 options and any of those 4 you are comfortable with being a quality, and I mean this, a quality above average NHL postseason goalie, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then you're looking at it as like, as long as we get one of them, we are better than we were going into the past 2 postseasons because we didn't have that. So then it becomes, when do they strike? And I think a lot of that is set up by the expansion draft.
Okay, perfect. So good segue.
I tried.
The show. There you go, Rob. So the expansion draft. Again, listen, Madden was talking about it today, throwing out who he thinks, is going to be unprotected, protected. And there's a couple of ways teams can do it, protecting forwards, defense, goalie, or skaters. Have you heard the way the Penguins are going to be doing that?
Yeah, I think they're leaning to the, 7-3-1 model?
Yeah, 7-3-1 model, yeah.
It doesn't really make sense for them to do the just protect 9. I don't understand why the NHL does this way. It's very bizarre to me, but so I think the big question is, look, I don't see why they need to protect Tristan Jarry, because worst case scenario is you leave him unprotected and Seattle doesn't take him, and okay, so what? Like, by leaving him unprotected, you either get his attention or you just declare publicly what everybody knows privately, which is you want better. Okay. Right. So does that mean then you protect Casey DeSmith? I mean, I would, but I think either way, like, I think if they think there's a chance Seattle would take Tristan Jarry, and I don't know why Seattle would, but if there's a chance Seattle, only because I don't think Tristan Jarry's contract fits with what I would expect Seattle to want out of goalies, given the analytical bent that they're taking, right? Okay, but maybe I'm wrong. I mean, maybe they have somebody that loves them. I don't know.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not ruling out that Tristan Jarry is going to be a good goalie in this league.
No.
I don't know if he'll be at Pittsburgh. I mean,
listen, he won a Memorial Cup with the Edmonton Oilers.
Yeah,
he showed he can play.
If I were a team, especially a team that didn't need to necessarily look at itself as a playoff team right now, I would go get him. He's been an all-star in this league, and he's won a Memorial Cup, which I think is the second hardest trophy to win in the sport. I think you agree with me there. Yeah. Maybe the hardest in some years. And so, like, there's a lot of upside there, right? And the contract's not bad for a guy that can potentially be a 55-game starter in this league. And maybe you luck into a guy that's going to be your franchise guy. I just don't know that if it works in Pittsburgh. So, okay. So I think they'll be able to move Tristan Jarry. Will they be able to move him for a great return? Probably not.
Mhm.
Do I think Seattle takes him? No. Who does Seattle take? Look, I think the Penguins.
So up front, who do you think, Rob? Up front, who do you think?
Oh, Crosby, Malkin.
Yeah.
I think they're going to protect Rust. I think they're going to protect Gensel, so that's 5. I think they protect Luger, that's 6, and I think they protect Carter, so that's 7, right? And then I got 3 defensemen, right?
Yeah.
Letang will be protected contractually. Dumoulin will be protected. I think when I wrote this piece for The Athletic, I actually said it would be Friedman that would be protected because Hextall really likes him.
He likes him, yeah.
And they don't have to protect P.O. Joseph or John Marino. And so that would mean if they would expose Matheson or Pedersen, maybe they get some cap relief there. I probably would revise that now and say I would protect Matheson, who I was really hard on this year. But I wrote this, I think, the other day in The Athletic. My thought is with Malkin, with being a real possibility he misses half the season, you're going to need offense. You're going to need to take the pressure off your forwards. And the one thing Matheson is elite at is creating offense. And so even the defensive liability that he can be at times, I think that the offset of the chances and the potential points he'll give you in a regular season, you might need that. So I would probably do that. And I think that's probably where they will go. Okay. Goalie, I think they're going to protect the Smith unless they just don't think there's any chance that Seattle would take Jari. And then I think it becomes maybe one of those guys we talked about you're eyeing as we're going to get him on an affordable deal, and we're going to pay like $6 million to our goalies, and Jari's going to be sort of our 1A in the season, but we want this veteran to be the guy in the playoffs. And then maybe at that point you think about we don't want to put that mental burden on Jari coming off this postseason.
How about a guy like Jason Zucker? Is this time done in Pittsburgh?
Well, look, I think Zucker's a good player. I don't know that he's the right player in Pittsburgh. To me, if I'm Seattle, I would be all in on Zucker, and I would really think about taking him and making him my captain.
I was just going to say that. He's good leadership.
Great leadership, great in the room, plays the game the right way, a fantastic player to watch. If you're a fan in Seattle, you'll marvel at his skating. He's one of the best skaters I've ever seen. I just sometimes wingers don't fit with the 2 centers in Pittsburgh. And I don't know that he's a good stylistic fit with Crosby or Malkin. So, to me, if I'm Seattle, I like that. And if I'm Pittsburgh, I like that because, then you don't have Zucker's contract, right? Like they're going to lose a good player.
Right.
I just think they can afford it to be a guy down the middle.
How about Kapanen? Is he can if he's not protected, can he be picked up?
He can be.
He can be, yeah.
Yeah. I don't think he would be. Just my guess. He's going into the final year of his deal, but he'll be a restricted free agent. I think the read on Evgeny. The read on Kasperi Kapanen is talented guy. He was much better than I thought he would be here.
Yeah.
I think this situation is perfect for him. Similar to Phil Kessel in that
100%.
The best version of him comes out surrounded by this leadership group.
Right.
So if I'm Seattle, I don't know that that's a good fit, although I think he's a good player.
So would you protect Kapanen instead of protecting Carter? Do you think leaving Carter unprotected, or is it a risk because
I don't think
Gino's hurt?
Yeah, I don't think
you can't lose him.
I don't think you can not protect Carter.
Okay.
Because then you're down to if they lose Carter, their centers are
Luger's second line center.
Jared McCann.
Yeah. And there's another guy you could lose too, right?
Jared McCann might be the guy that they're going to have some hard decisions, right? Yeah. I think that's where it comes in. So that's where they might be better off going with the other formula where you just protect, and I always get the number wrong. I think it's 8 and a goalie as opposed to, is it 8 a goalie and then 7 or 3 and a goalie? I forget, but
I think it's 8 and a goalie. I think it's an 8 and a goalie.
Yeah, they might be better off depending on where they value things. the problem with the Malkin injury isn't that like they were always going to have to protect getting Malkin, but because that takes so much away from them offensively and at the center position, it certainly changes the way they have to view things. I just don't think you can. First of all, I think they probably had a handshake agreement with Carter that they would protect him. So I think Carter's on the list.
Okay. Rutherford versus Hextall. And we have about 5 or 6 minutes here. I know we could go on and on and on about this, but Rutherford, one of the things I have in my notes here is that when he wanted a player, the whole world knew about it.
Yeah.
And he went after that player. If that player succeeded, if it was Brassard, if it was Zucker per se, if he wanted that guy, he went after it. With this regime, like we discussed before we went on the show here, it's like crickets right now in Pittsburgh.
I prefer Hextall for this reason.
Okay.
My best strength is making sources and getting them to tell me things. And I'd rather have the challenge of cultivating new sources and seeing if I can sort of do what I did under previous regimes versus a guy that just said everything to everybody.
Exactly. Yeah.
From a hockey standpoint, I actually think Hextall's whether he can do the job. I don't know how much we can put into what happened in Philly. That's always a weird market.
Yeah.
But I think his temperament is what the Penguins need. I think one of the reasons they had the success they did in the regular season, not coincidentally, I don't think it was after Rutherford resigned, was he made 50 trades in 6-some seasons. Like at some point, everybody not named Crosby was looking around that room going, am I next? Am I next? We would joke like, all right, he's trading Letang and that sofa and Josh Yohe. Like, and with Hextall, I think they were just like, first of all, I think it put everybody on alert, right? Like, hey, new regime, we all got to find something here. Yeah. But also, I think it allowed everybody to go, they're probably not blowing anything up for 3 weeks, so maybe we can unpack, right? I also think that approach, Hextall's a very studious, meticulous guy. I think the fact that you're not hearing a lot of stuff, I tweeted earlier before we taped this. Yeah. My question about the Penguins this offseason is really, can they finish a lot of the things they'll be in on? Because I think Hextall's got, from what I've heard, he's exploring a lot of things, but that doesn't mean they'll do everything. Right. And what I've been told, and I'm fairly confident in this, just if they don't make a lot of moves this summer, that doesn't mean Hextall isn't executing a plan that's going to take shape place next summer. He's setting it up. So I think for this team, Hextall's the right guy. I think maybe your listeners don't know this, so I'll share this. I've had a lot of people that have dealt with Hextall in terms of agents tell me it's very clear that he's the one calling the shots. Berkey is there as sort of an advisory capacity to handle a lot of the public stuff Hextall doesn't like doing. But if you look at the way they've built this hockey operations staff, rebuilt it, I should say, and they've just we didn't know about Jeff Carter, right? We didn't know about Friedman. We didn't know about Bluger. It's not like I'm not making calls. We just didn't know, right? And I can tell you, used to be you'd call any agent for any player and they'd know about something else going on because everybody knew everything with Jim.
Yeah.
Not happening. And I think that's good. I think the Penguins need stability and a little bit of stealth. So from a hockey standpoint, I think this is what they need.
Perfect. So you had mentioned during the podcast you're writing a book on Gino. Is that correct?
Yeah. We're writing. It's been a long process. We've decided it's going to come out at the end of his career. We originally had it come out sort of mid-career, but then they won a couple of championships again. Married and had a kid, and we were like, I went to Miami after the 17 Cup win, and I went to Moscow in 19 for the second time, and I was there. I was like, where my book? And I'm like, no, at this point, some of the stuff you've told me, you're not going to want to talk about. So you can probably just put this out when you're done. I make money off book at the end. So I'm ready. It's been the best and most excruciating experience because I've always had a great relationship with Evgeny. I was I've really been the one person in North America that has cultivated a relationship with him. I find him on a personal level to be incredibly interesting and compelling, but it is hard to do a book with somebody when you are working with two different languages and you cover them, right? So, but I honestly, I'm very open about sort of my mental health struggles, the disorders I have, the ADHD, the anxiety, and the depression. There are times the heaviness of feeling like I'm the only one that can tell this story that he once told the way he wants it told. It's a biography, but it's more in a narrative form, and it's really a book that he wants, as he says, to use his life story to teach lessons to other people. There are times I feel a real heaviness with that responsibility, and it'll, sort of foul me up. But I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. But I don't want Evgeny to stop playing anytime soon because he's such a wonderful player to watch. But I also, there's a part of me that's like, well, when he's done, we'll be closer to being finished, and that will be that. And then I never write another book.
So before we end the show, timetable on Malkin. When do you think he's going to be back? And contract extensions for Christopher Letang and Evgeny as well. Any news on that?
Well, look, I can tell you that before. So I can tell you this: the ligament that he hurt on the second hit is not the ligament that was injured on the first hit.
Interesting.
The ligament that was injured on the first hit is still injured. So he did have. So he has his surgery. I got to think how I say this delicately here. His surgery was very significant, and the Penguins aren't playing games when they said they should know more. They hope by training camp they know what his full recovery time will be. But I warn people, Penguin fans should not take that to be when training camp comes, it's going to be a couple of weeks and we'll see Evgeny Malkin. I think they would be pleased if they had him by December. I think he would be thrilled if he was able to get a good month of games in prior to the NHL potentially going to the Olympics. But we don't know because we're dealing with ligaments that were stretched, ruptured, partially torn. Like we're dealing with as somebody said to me, it's a ligament soup in that right knee.
Okay.
And there's a lot of simmering that needs to happen. And so the timetable is, I don't know, but I don't think we're close. And he's going to be 35 years old. So the contract extensions.
Yeah.
It was my understanding that this August, before all this, they were going to sit down and try to reach terms on deals with Malkin and Letang. I still think that is likely that they'll do that. I don't know if the Malkin stuff may be a sort of now, do we want to wait and see how he comes back? I do know that Mario Lemieux, you guys have all heard of him. Mario Lemieux, one of their majority co-owners, told Evgeny when they found out that he needed the surgery, we're going to take care of you, which is the right thing to do. The guy played on one leg. But my guess is, despite what Sidney Crosby says about not wanting to play GM, the Penguins know that Sidney has been worth a lot more than they've paid him. That's his choice. He
signed that contract. Yeah.
But the deal was you build a cup team around him and tell Sidney Crosby that we're parting with Malkin and Letang, and we're taking a chance on other guys that might help you win in your final 3 years.
Yeah.
Versus, I know that these guys can win with me. I think that's going to be a hard sell. They don't want to potentially irk Sidney Crosby. They want him finishing his career here. They want Sidney going from retirement to ownership stake. Like that's what they want, right?
Okay.
If you want to be a GM, Sid, be it.
Yeah.
I think because of that, we're going to see deals get done. But the Malkin thing does make it a bit more tricky. And what we also don't know is, Evgeny's also taken less. And, Chris Letang, I think when he signed his contract, a lot of people thought he was overpaid. Now you look at it and go, 7.25 for Chris Letang's pretty big.
That's a good deal.
I honestly think if they could get both of those guys for like 3-year, $21 million deals, like I think people would be like, are you going to pay that to guys in their late 30s? And I'd be like, yeah, because what are you going to pay other guys you're expecting to be your 2C and your 1D? But the bottom line is those guys are going to have to take less. The good thing from the Penguins' financial standpoint is not from a cap perspective, but after next season, not this upcoming one, but after next season, Sidney Crosby starts only making $3 million a year. His cap hit is still at the 8.7. But his actual salary is at the $3 million. Why is that important? They're coming off 2 years of basically no revenue. This is going to help them have the money to do this stuff.
Yeah.
So I hope it happens. I understand the Duncan Keith thing, but I think Crosby, Malkin, and Letang, even more so than the three in Chicago, have they're part of the greatest era in the franchise's history in terms of success. When people say, who's the team of the salary cap era, I go, well, only one team since those three have got together has never missed the playoffs, gone to 4 championship rounds and won 3, and had multiple MVPs, scoring champions, all this, and it's the Penguins. Right. To me, they're the team of the cap era. Those three deserve to have their numbers in the rafters, and I don't think Mario Lemieux wants another Jaromir Jagr situation.
Exactly, for sure. So, Rob, if you want to tell the viewers where they can follow you at, check out your articles.
It's a hell of a question. I go to theathletic.com or download our app and subscribe. Even if you don't like me, we got all the best hockey writers, or most of them anyway. Yeah. If you get the Athletic subscription, by the way, not only do you get every sport we cover, you get every NHL writer. So it's, trust me, I'm not just shilling. Although I'm happy to shill. My macho man voice.
Here we go. Some WWF.
On Twitter, I think I'm on Twitter at @real_Rob Rossi. And if you go to the Insta machine, I'm under that. Now that has nothing to do with my work, but if you want a real laugh and want to see an old guy doing workouts that he couldn't possibly handle, soon to be with a repaired right arm, follow me there and you'll have a laugh too.
Yeah. Awesome, Rob. Again, thank you for coming on the show tonight. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Great Penguins insight. If you want to become a Lounge member, hit that subscribe button below. Follow us on Instagram, The Hockey Lounge, and have a great night. Stay safe, and we will see you next week. Big week next week. We got the drafts happening. Seattle will be picking their team. So have a great night. See you next week.